There are many animal communicators in the world, but much less professionals or even teachers. You are a combination of all. So tell me, what is your work about?
Well, my job is really to help humans understand their animals better and to help the animals understand their humans better. So if anyone has an issue or a problem that they're trying to solve with their animal friend, whether it's a dog, cat, horse, and then on the bigger pictures, wild animals as well that are looked after by people, they will come to me and say, can you communicate with my animal to find out why they are behaving in this way, or what I can do to help them. Sometimes people ask me to talk to the animals, to tell them that something's going to happen, there's going to be change in the house, or that they have to go away, or even if an animal has to be rehomed for a particular reason. It's always very good to explain to them. Because of that side of my work, that's why I started teaching animal communication as well, so that I could help people to tell the animals themselves what's happening if there's changes, because it's very easy to communicate to the animals actually, more difficult to listen to them. But part of my work is to explain to the animals what is going on in the human world, in their human world around them, and then also to teach people how to communicate with their own animals, so they don't have to call in a professional animal communicator all the time.
Before we started, you asked for a spare chair for your cloth. Can you explain why?
Whenever I'm doing a workshop or having an important meeting about animals and wildlife, we always have a spare chair to represent the ancestors and to represent the lion ancestors in particular. So I work quite a lot with this cloth just as a reminder of who we actually working with and working for.
And what about the lion symbol? Because as I know you, there would be some meaning behind it.
This cloth is something that is used by African shamans to signify that you have been initiated into the healing tradition. But in particular, this one with the lion, and in this particular design, is from Swaziland, which is a little country separate to South Africa but sort of surrounded by South Africa. And the lion in particular represents your family's ancestors. So it's quite interesting to me, for once, that the symbol of family is a lion, and as well as the symbol of our ancestors. And I have this cloth with me just to invite the ancestors to be next to me during this time. Also, it's a reminder that the lions are our family, or my family certainly, and I think all of humanity has a connection with lions. And who's going to speak for the lions? So that's one part of my job, is to speak for the lions, and I have the lion sitting next to me, the lion energy, my lion family.
We were talking about animal communication. Can you describe one average day in your daily routine? So how one common day of a professional animal communicator looks like?
Well, unfortunately nowadays I spend a lot of time on the computer communicating with people via email. But when I do have a consultation, I'll normally go to someone's home. I prefer working with animals in their own home environment, and I'll spend an hour, maybe an hour and a half, maximum usually 2 hours with the animals and their humans, and I'll sit in a quiet space with them and connect with them on a heart level and find out what's going on and what they want to tell me. And then I'll relay that to their humans, and we'll work a solution out together for the problem, if there is a problem. And part of that work as well is to teach the humans. I explain how it works for the humans, how they can start communicating with their own animals, so they don't have to call me in every time they want to tell their animal something. It's about giving people the courage as well to work with animals in their own way, and to help them understand how the animals communicate with each other and how they'll communicate with themselves. Some of the time I also do distant communication where people send me photographs of the animals over email, and then I will usually print the photograph out, and then when I have some quiet time I'll sit in a very quiet meditative space and connect with the energy of that animal through their photograph and receive the information that I need from the animal, and then either phone the animal carer, the human, to explain the information that I got, or send them an email, and then we can discuss it further from there.
Have you encountered a situation where the owner or the carer of the animal did not want to hear the information or the message from the animal?
It's actually more common than I thought it would be, mostly because a lot of the problems and issues that animals have, the people usually think it's a problem that the animal has, and usually it's a reflection of what's going on in the person's life. So often quite a personal thing. For example, I had a client whose animal was very ill and dying, and the main message that the animals gave to me was that her person needed to split up with her partner because she was in a toxic relationship, and it was making her sick, it was making the person sick, whereas the cat was actually manifesting that sickness, and she may not have been so sick if the person was healthy and looking after herself. So that was obviously very difficult for the person to hear, although she knew that it was right. She knew that she was in a toxic relationship. What was interesting to me in that case is, even though her mother had told her this, her friends had told her this, the only time she actually took it seriously was when she heard it from her cat. Because there was no way I could have known anything about her relationship. I didn't even know that she was in a relationship. All I could see was this very destructive relationship between two people, and that's what the cat was showing me, so I had to say it. And then she told me, well, yes, I am in a relationship that I'm not happy in, but I don't know how to leave. It becomes quite very personal sometimes when the animals tell us things, and a lot of the times the people don't want to hear that. It might take some time before they are ready to listen to it.
So we can say the animal is our mirror. In fact, that the animal reflects our inner emotions or thoughts that we even don't know about, or maybe don't want to know about.
You can say that, yes, very much. They will reflect our emotions often. If we're really angry at something, they can become angry and aggressive. If we're feeling down and low, they will show us and feel down and low as well. And often on a physical level, with a disease or an illness or an accident, they can show us what's going on in the energy around us or even within us before it manifests in ourselves. So they are so sensitive that they will pick it up first, and it will manifest physically in their own bodies. And that can be a warning to us that if we don't take note of what's going on, we can also get sick. So if we really observe and listen to the animals, we can know when we need to do work on ourselves or in the environment.
What have you learned from animals?
I've learned to look after myself. Mm-hmm. And that, you know, if I'm happy, that they're happy. And so I've learned that it's not selfish to actually sometimes having to put myself first on a health level and an energy level. Whereas before I would have been, oh, you know, I can't do this because somebody needs something. And now I realize the animals will tell me if I'm not looking after myself. Another really important lesson is to live in the moment. So animals are very much live in the present moment. They're not always worrying about the past or the future. As long as they're happy in the present moment, they're happy. And it's only really when they have a strong relationship to their humans, and their humans are unhappy in that present moment, or because of the past or because of the future, then they start becoming unhappy in the present.
Well, but that's more about animals who have people who love them and have family. But how about animals in shelters? As shelter is obviously not a place where animal could be happy.
Well, I've seen animals in shelters where they do have times of peace. So when the sun is shining into the cage, they'll go and lie in the sun and stretch out and relax. When they know they're safe. It's obviously there are places that are not good for them, and then they are living in the present, and if the present moment is not nice, they will be unhappy. So, you know, when I'm saying they live in the present, they are only scared and unhappy when there is a reason to be scared and unhappy in that present moment. Obviously, there are animals that are unhappy when they're not well looked after. It's about seeing the animal in the present moment. I remember someone asked me a question, well, not really a question, just saying that she wants to go and help walk dogs at a shelter. But she hated it whenever she had to put them back into their cage. It made her feel so horrible that she just couldn't do the job anymore. And I said, but how is the dog when you're on the walk? Oh no, they love it, they're very happy. So I said, so, you know, that's about you being unhappy because you feel sorry to put them back. But in that moment of walking, you are doing such a wonderful thing for the dog and for her. Meanwhile, while she's walking, she's thinking, oh, I don't want to go back and put the animal in the kennel. But the animal's not thinking that. The dog's not thinking that. The dog's just thinking, yay, we're going for a walk, it's wonderful. Of course, when you put them back, they're going to say, oh, I really don't want to go back there. But it's also part of their reality, and you can explain to them why they need to go back, and that you will try your best to give them some love, give them exercise, get them a new home.
You've been animal communicator for, I don't know, 12, 13, maybe even more years. There has to be many great experiences with animals. Is there any that is most exciting or the most interesting for you?
I think the most interesting experiences that I have with animals is when I actually tune into their energy body and feel what it's like to become the animal. And just recently on the workshop in Prague, we had a baby python who was 7 months old. And I hadn't really I've worked with snake energy, but not with a specific python and someone so young. And when I tuned into that energy, it was very still and quiet and slow and peaceful. When my logic was saying the snake should probably be a bit scared because it's in a room with 40 people all wanting to handle it and touch him her. Was there him?
Her.
It's a she. And logically, I would have thought, oh no, she'd be wanting to hide in her terrarium. But she was so curious, but in a very still and peaceful way. You know, the slow movement and the observing and smelling everything as well. That was incredibly interesting to me. They surprised me a lot, the different energies of animals, and that's when I know that I'm really in touch with their energy, especially when it's different to how I expect it to be.
What is the energy, for example, of elephant? Like you were talking about python, so it's completely different from elephant.
Elephant is obviously a very big energy, but also very slow and quiet, and a very gentle, loving energy rather than aggressive, angry energy. Of course, depending on the circumstances that the animal is in, if you're tuning into one specific animal. But in general, very gentle, very loving, very concerned. I remember when I'm communicating with one particular elephant, her feeling very concerned for humanity and feeling very sad that we have this terrible separation sickness, that we keep on seeing ourselves as separate from nature and destroying nature because of that. And really we're destroying ourselves. So she was very concerned about humanity. Almost to have a mother energy for the planet.
It is obvious that you love lions. You have them all around you. You even work with white lions a lot. But is there any other animal that would be your favorite one?
I do work with the baboons in Cape Town as well, and it's interesting to me because when I first, before I even started the animal communication work, I didn't used to like baboons. I love all animals, but I was a little bit scared of baboons, and I think the reason was because they are so human-like. But when I started working with them and getting to know them and really getting to see how they care for each other, how they live together in the troop, they are very human-like. They look after their babies. You know, if the mother is injured, the father will carry the baby for her. I've seen them really helping the injured, a brother or a sister, or they really work together as a family. And it just fascinates me how human-like they are, and yet they are still so connected to nature, because they are our cousins, but they're primates like us, but they are still of the earth, still part of nature, whereas we have separated ourselves so much from them.
Speaking about baboons, I know there is quite interesting story you experienced recently, where the communication with baboons helped resolve the relationship and coexistence of baboons and the habitats of one small village. Can you share this story?
Okay, one of the most interesting and quite eye-opening experience that I had with some troops of baboons up in the Garden Route area of South Africa. A group of people who live in quite a small village asked me to come and help them solve the issue of the baboons who were becoming very aggressive when they came through the village. Normally in the past they would come through, but they wouldn't cause damage to the houses, or people weren't scared of them, and they were becoming really aggressive, and people didn't understand why and didn't know how to solve the issue, and a lot of people were starting to shoot them and thinking that, you know, by killing them that would solve the problem, and this group of people wanted to find a peaceful solution. So I ended up doing an animal communication workshop, or a baboon communication workshop, for this small group of people. Well, not so small, a group of about 30 people. And what came to me from the baboons themselves, when I asked them what was the reason for the change in behavior, was an image of a baboon being skinned, and it was not a very nice image at all, sort of being hung up like on a butcher's hook. And the words came to me, there has been a violation. And I was horrified by this, because the first thing I thought about was bushmeat, where the baboons were being eaten by people and being hunted for their meat. And this is something that we don't come across in South Africa. South Africans don't eat baboons, I think because they are seen as so human-like that it would be a violation to eat them. And to me it is a violation. And obviously to the baboons it's a violation. So I was very hesitant to actually even speak this out to the group, because I thought, no, that, you know, it's like I'm accusing the local people of hunting baboons, and this is the cause of the whole problem. But I was brave enough, because the animals have taught me that I need to be honest, and if I see something I must tell them, I must speak it out. And it came to pass after I had verbalized this, that yes, it had been a rumor, and someone had actually overheard people talking in the town about a group of people hunting baboons for bushmeat. And this was something that was quite new, that had only happened quite recently. So, you know, there we got the information straight from the baboon's mouth, so to speak. Whereas everyone was thinking, oh, well, the reasons why they were coming more into the town was because of the deforestation, because of the logging in the forest, and because there were more people, and because of an electric substation being built in the area. But the real crux of the matter, the real reason why they were becoming so angry, was because of this violation. So it made sense. So as a result of this, the villagers were starting to investigate if the wildlife rangers who are supposed to protect the forests and the animals knew about this, and if anything could be done, if they could seek out the perpetrators. And it's an ongoing process, so we'll see what comes of it. This happened quite recently. Mm-hmm. But as a result of the communication, you know, other avenues of solution have been sought and found.
And is there any animal that you kind of like, you don't need to get in touch with? Is there any?
Actually, I don't think there's any part of nature that I feel like I need to avoid. On the energy level, on the physical level, ticks. Maybe. Mosquitoes. I don't really have a problem with mosquitoes, but they don't bother me too much, which is also interesting for me, because a lot of people are bothered by them. But if we look on a different level, we can communicate, and I think we need to communicate with all of nature, the good and the bad, you know, how we are the ones that judge nature, but actually in nature there is no good and bad. Everyone has a role to play.
You mentioned mosquitoes, which brings a question to my mind. What if we have sudden visible appearance of one particular animal in our life? For example, out of the blue we start having mice in our house, or we are terribly bitten by mentioned mosquitoes, or in the summer we are buttered by wasps in the garden. Is it just a coincidence, or does it have some special meaning for us?
I think any animal that we come into contact with and their presence is very, very strong in our lives, they normally do have a message for us, and it's normally a personal message. So if a mosquito is biting you a lot and you just can't get rid of them, it might be something personal in your own life that you need to be less irritated by, perhaps, or you need to be calmer about, or more accepting of. So always observe who's around you when you're in nature. Or, nature comes into our homes as well. So, and look at what it feels like and what it could mean for you.
In your book, Where is Biggles, you describe incredible story of two golden lionesses who were transported from one land to another one. And I know there is continuation that is as dramatic as the story you describe in your book. Can you tell the other story? Okay,
well, for those of you who have read the book, they'll know the quite dramatic story of how they arrived at the Tsau Lion Reserve from a 50,000 hectare wild reserve to a smaller one to be part of the project. But the story continues where, on a scientific level, the best way to introduce lions to other lions is through something called boma bonding. And the boma is quite a large enclosure in the habitat where they would be living in the wild. And what happened here, the two lionesses, the thought behind it and the process was supposed to be that the two male lions were in one boma, in one enclosure, and the two lionesses would be put in the enclosure next door, so they would be able to get to know each other through the fence and bond through the fence, so that when they did meet each other where there was no fence, there wouldn't be fighting, because male and female lions, or strange lions, can actually get quite aggressive with each other if they first meet. But when Enyaleti and Kainisa arrived into the boma and they were first let out of the crate, I think it was Enyaleti who just ran at the fence and broke through the electrified fence out into the wild of the reserve. It was a protected reserve, but out of the boma. And her sister didn't take long either. She was a little bit more cautious, but she took maybe about an hour, and then she decided, I'm not going to stay here without my sister, I'm going off to find her, and she also broke through the fence. And of course the scientists thought, oh my word, what are we going to do? They haven't got collars to track them. How are we going to know if they're safe? And because even though it's a smaller piece of land, it's still, it was still sort of 400 hectares. And so everyone was in a panic. But actually, at the end of the day, it was the best way for them to be introduced to that new land, because they could figure out where all the boundaries were. They could become familiar with the landscape, where the safe places were, where the good hunting was, where all the animals stayed. And they would always, even though they were very shy and it was quite difficult to find them, when people were worried about them and they hadn't seen them for a while, they would always show themselves. And eventually they came to visit the two white male lions who were still in the boma. So they did the boma bonding, but on their own terms. And it was actually much better. Jason Turner, the scientist that heads up the project, actually learned from that experience and listened to them. And now whenever new lionesses come in, they will always let them become familiar with the surrounding territory before introducing them to the males. So they knew what they were doing on a much better level, bigger picture stuff than the humans at the time.
In your book, you also describe technique how to tune into the body of some animal. In fact, how to become the animal and see with his or her eyes, which can help when some animal is missing, so we can see what's around the animal and more easily find the animal. But is there a possibility or situation where the animal doesn't want us or doesn't let us to tune into his or her body? Can it happen?
Yes, it does happen, and it can be for any number of reasons. It could be that they really know what they're doing and they don't want help. It can be a possibility that the person's intention isn't pure, or their energy doesn't feel right for the animal, that they don't want to connect with that particular person, or just the space that the person's in. You know, if you're in a lot of fear when you are trying to communicate with an animal, there will be a block. And in the case of a missing animal, there is often a lot of fear around, because the responsibility of finding that animal, of the fear of not knowing if the animal's dead or injured, or there can be a lot of negative energy around that. So that would be a block, and the animal wouldn't let you connect with him or her at that time.
I believe that the intention of all people who are interested or doing animal communication is good, but still, is it possible to misuse animal communication? For example, a hunter will call the animal to a concrete place and then shoot it.
I don't think so, because the connection is the key to communicating with animals is unconditional love. And you get different kinds of hunters, obviously, but if it is a trophy hunter who's hunting purely for ego and wanting to be a man, I really don't think he would be successful using the method of communication. We're looking at the tradition of the Bushmen, who would hunt only for food and with absolute love and respect for the animal that they were about to kill and use for their own life. Then there's an agreement between the prey and the predator, the animal and the human. So then I think animal communication does come into it, but with that love and respect. But just for your own ego, even if it's the ego of thinking, oh, I can talk with the animals, that wouldn't work, because the animals can feel it.
And is there agreement between animals when they hunt each other?
I believe there is, absolutely. My experience with the lions, whenever they are intent on hunting, they often don't succeed in their hunt, and the only time they do succeed is when they have permission from the animal to take that life. One of the most beautiful experiences I've had with the wildebeest, who are the lion's preferred prey, and they probably hunt them the most, is when I first started working at the reserve, and we were sitting with a whole a whole herd of wildebeest, and I asked them how did they feel about being there to be lion food, basically. And they showed me a really beautiful image of the herd running in a circle and running faster and faster, and then they'd lift off the ground, and then the image they were creating like an upside down tornado almost, a cone structure, and at the top was a winged lion, and it was like they were transforming and integrating and becoming the winged lion. So it showed me on an energy level how through the lions eating them they become the lion, and it was it was just part of their role on the planet. So there was no there was no fear or nothing negative about it at all.
When I read your book, I was amazed or fascinated by how you described the smallest detail to the animal of what will happen or what will go on. Like in the story of two golden lionesses, where you describe the darting, how the needle will get through the skin, what they will feel, what will happen afterwards. Why to explain, or why to go in such small details when talking with animals?
I think I feel it's very important to be honest with them. So if you pretend that this is whatever is going to happen to them is going to be a good, fine experience, they're not going to trust you the next time. But if they know exactly what to expect, even just taking your cat to the vet, tell them you need to go to the vet because you need to have your injections, and it's just going to hurt for a little bit and then it'll make you feel better. So anything that is going to be uncomfortable or anything that feels unnatural but has to happen to the animal because of humans' rules or the way we have to live with them, we need to explain in absolute detail what's going to happen for them to be more accepting of it. And then you find that the process is so much easier than if it's a big surprise for them. Because if it's a big surprise for them, they get a fright and they'll want to resist any physical interaction.
Can we lie to animals?
We can lie to them, but they'll never trust us again. So I think they do know when we're lying, depending on the level of lying. It can be we lying to ourselves at the same time with what I wrote about in Wynter's Biggles, when I was telling him that it's all going to be wonderful and safe, we're all going to be a happy family. It wasn't the truth, and he knew that. That's why he wasn't coming back to me. And it was only when I understood that deep inside of me were we reunited again.
Once at the Tsao Conservation Reserve, when we went to see the white lions into the bush, you were talking about spiritual meaning of them. Is it just with the white lions, or do all animals have their spiritual meaning?
In my experience, whenever I communicate with an animal, there seems to be two different aspects of them. The one is the very physical on earth, so if they've got a sore leg, or they're hungry, or they need a soft bed, or they need more space. That's very much on the physical. But then the other aspect of them is this connection to the energy of the universe. It's the only way I can describe it, when they can show us things that is happening on a different level other than the physical. And I think they experience that as part of their natural lives. They are connected to that in every way. They can often reflect something that's happening in society as a whole, which wouldn't make sense to us unless we were tapped into that other world as well. And we can start understanding that other world through them. They can show us when we connect to them on that level. If you look at ancient indigenous cultures, like the Native American Indians, the African tradition as well, you'll often find that spiritual meaning, that the animal represents something in humans. And you can feel that when you connect with them as well. So for example, the wolf would really represents our wild nature and our own intuition and connection. And that's historically and traditionally through indigenous cultures that we have that belief. But when you really go into that feeling, and when people get messages from wolves, that is usually what they are saying, what they are telling the person. Trust your intuition more and become more connected to your wild nature.
We were talking about mammals, a little bit about insects, but how about fish? First that comes to my mind, though it's not the fish but mammal, the dolphins.
Yes, and then sharks as well. Sharks can also, we can communicate with all living beings on this planet, and that includes all the sea creatures. I've worked quite a bit with dolphins, and as you say, they are mammals, but they live in a completely different environment. Very beautiful, joyful energy, and fascinated by humans. You know, they really feel a connection with us. And like the elephant, have a concern for us and want to help us. Even there's so many stories about dolphins rescuing people who are in distress. But also a different fish, you know, the shark, who's actually not a mammal at all, we can communicate with them as well, and we don't need to be afraid of them even, as long as we give them that respect and don't invade their space like we as humans normally do, and really work with them with that love and respect.
Well, but they can be pretty dangerous animal, right? Especially the wild ones that are known for their, let's say, special taste in people.
You know, there's a great misconception that whenever sharks see people in the water, they want to eat them. Basically, sharks test and smell with their teeth. So they're testing to see if the human is something edible, and they'll very seldom want to eat them. So, you know, they'll have a little shark bite out of the leg, which isn't very pleasant, but the intention of the shark is not to kill and eat them, it's just there's something strange in the water here, I want to see what it is. And you know, I've spoken to many surfers where we live in Cape Town. There's a huge surfing community, and they will say they know there's sharks in the water because there's no shark nets or anything in Cape Town, but they go with the intention of really being at one with the sea, and their intention is not to harm anyone, and they know that they're in the shark space and it's their own risk that they're taking. And the surfers who have an attitude like that have surfed with sharks in the water where they can see them, and they haven't been harmed or hurt at all.
Is there any animal, or better say species, that is hard or even impossible to connect with?
I haven't found that. I've found I can connect with any animal. There are individuals though that sometimes don't want to communicate, and one of the there was actually an example of this on the recent workshop where one of the participants was worried that he wasn't doing it properly when he was communicating with a photograph of a dog, and he said he just couldn't feel any connection where he'd been quite successful with the other practice sessions. So I looked at the dog, and the first thing I felt from the dog was a feeling of fear. Well, I started feeling fear inside me because I felt like the dog wanted to just bite me or, you know, be aggressive towards me. And I just felt a complete block that the dog didn't want to know, did not want to communicate. So that would have been very difficult to try and communicate effectively, especially in that short space of time. You'd really need to work with the trust issue that the dog had with people. And when I asked the person that the dog belongs to, or the carer, the human, she explained that yes, he's a very distant dog and he can be quite aggressive, and it made complete sense to her that we couldn't connect with him easily.
During the time I have been studying your course of animal communication, I realized that the information from animal I received especially information related to their habits or how they live. So that very often these information are completely different what I would expect with my logical mind, or different to what I learned from books or in school. And very often it's quite surprised for me. Do you have also this kind of experience?
Sometimes the physical behavior of animals can be quite strange for us in our human logic and the way we behave as humans. We expect animals to behave in a certain way because we relate to them in our human way, and then when they do something different we're quite horrified or quite shocked. For example, the baboons, even though earlier I was saying how family orientated they are, how helpful they are towards each other and how they work as a family and as a troop together, the one thing they don't do is share food. So even a baby wanting to take food from the mum will not give the baby her food. Obviously she breastfeeds until they can eat for themselves, but it's very much a hierarchical system, so the alpha male will eat first, and if you give as a human what we do, what we always want to do is feed animals and feed things because we think we're doing something right. If a human had to give a baboon some food, they would feel superior to that human because it's only the alpha male that gets the food first. So if you're giving your food to the baboon, they think, oh, that's great. That's my food. I'm better than you better give it to me. So that's actually what has caused the problems between humans and baboons, is the feeding, because they associate humans with easy food now, and they'll just, if you're walking in nature and you're carrying a packet of food, they know that the food's in that packet and they feel, well, it's their right to have that food, so they'll just go up and grab it from you. Whereas in the troop, if a baby had to do that to an adult, they would get smacked so hard. The discipline is very strong in the troop, in the family. Whereas the humans just run away screaming because they're so scared. So we've actually created this problem ourselves because of our human behavior and not understanding how baboon behavior is so much different.
If you have just one sentence, what would you say to people who are interested in the animal communication?
The animal communication, the interspecies communication, is just that. It works with all species. And I always say to people, everything is possible. Don't let your fears and your belief systems limit you in how you communicate with any